All right, everyone, welcome back to the Chris the Freelancer podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about Istanbul for digital nomads, my review after a month of being here. I arrived on May 31st, and today is June 30th, so I've spent a whole month in Istanbul, Turkey, and it's been quite the interesting experience. Today is going to be a solo podcast, which I think is going to be a good thing because I have my notes here and I can stick to just what I think we need to talk about in terms of Istanbul. I've spent a whole month here, so I feel like I've gotten a good lay of the land. It wasn't like my previous experience before this, which was in Lisbon. I was only there for a few days, so I couldn't really get the whole full experience of it. So that's why I had my guests with me. But this time it's just me, and I'm going to share with you everything that I've learned about Istanbul and Turkey in this episode. So first of all, let's start at the beginning. Why did I choose Istanbul? Well, this summer in Europe is a bit different for me than I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I'm essentially doing what I wanted to do in 2020 now in 2022. Obviously, in 2020, the pandemic hit, and I was always planning on going and doing a Euro trip during the summer in 2020, but I only got to do the Asian part of my world trip in 2020. It lasted 7 weeks and then had to come home. So I have always wanted to go to some of these quote-unquote digital nomad destinations, but now 2 years later, after 2020, I've got a few trips going on. So Istanbul for me, I had the month of June basically free. There was no trips that I had planned. I have a trip planned next month. I had a trip in Portugal. That was last month. And so I was just looking for some place in Europe to stay for a month, affordable, a place where I can be productive, but also have like a cool experience. And honestly, it was hard to decide where to stay for this month of June. But then I got to give a shout out, to Riley Bennett from Living That Life. I watched his video on Istanbul and I just caught the vibe of the place from that video, and I decided pretty much straight away, okay, Istanbul is going to be the city that I stay for the month of June. And a month later, I can say without any regret or anything that it was a good choice to spend this month in Istanbul. We'll get into the pros and cons of living here, but it matched the vibe that Riley was putting out in that video and the vibe that initially attracted me to come here. All right, so starting at, leaving Lisbon airport and coming to Istanbul, one of the biggest reliefs, and this continued into my trip in Istanbul, was no masks. So not only are masks not mandatory anywhere as far as I understand, or anywhere where you will go as a tourist or a digital nomad in Istanbul, but even the airline that brings you here, Turkish Airlines, doesn't require them either. So as soon as I got on the plane in Lisbon, I did not have to put on a mask at all. So this was the first flight I'd taken since the pandemic where I didn't have to wear a mask. Apart from one in Australia where I just chanced it and didn't wear a mask and got away with it. It was like an hour flight. But this was like a 4-hour flight. Nobody told you to put a mask on. And so I could fly mask-free to Istanbul. And then you get here, nobody asks you to put on a mask. There is basically no COVID restrictions that are obvious to me, or were obvious to me during this last month. So basically, COVID doesn't exist here in Istanbul. You might be curious about the entry requirements. I looked them up. Apparently, there's supposed to be random testing at the airport. I did not experience any of that. Maybe I was one of the people that didn't get randomly tested. I don't know if they still do that. As Riley said in the Thailand video, maybe all of this is just security theater anyway. So maybe they don't really randomly test people. And I wouldn't be surprised if they say they do one thing but don't do it, because it is Turkey. So yeah, COVID, not an issue here. Obviously check the requirements ahead of time before you come, and obviously check things more closely if you're unvaccinated. I'm vaccinated, so I can kind of relax a little bit when it comes to world travel right now. But if you're unvaccinated, you guys have got to be extra careful. Just heard a horror story from a friend back home. He wasn't even allowed to leave Australia because he was unvaccinated. And it's not even a rule that Australia has. It's not even a rule that the country he's traveling to has. It was some sort of airline rule. So always check, guys. You want to check where you're leaving from, the airline, and where you're going to. Make sure you just do a quick check. Most of the time, I'm sure it'll be fine, but sometimes it can catch you out. All right, so COVID shouldn't be an issue. Let's talk about the internet. So that's, one of the most important things traveling as a digital nomad. And I gotta say, Wi-Fi is okay at at cafes and stuff. The most annoying thing, I think it's annoying, about Istanbul Wi-Fi is typically when you go to a cafe anywhere in the world, they give you the Wi-Fi password and you log in direct to their Wi-Fi, and you're connecting via, I think it's called WPA or WPS, and that's the normal way of connecting to Wi-Fi. Well, in most cafes, I would say in Istanbul, most in my experience at least, it works a little different. The Wi-Fi is open, and then you open up, you log into the Wi-Fi, and then it'll come up with a form, and you got to put in your details, including a phone number, which they're going to text you a code in order to log in. I remember when I went to Starbucks the first time, and I was just like, oh, do you have a Wi-Fi password? And they're like, phone, do it through phone. And I'm like, what do you mean do it through phone? And then a bit of confusion, and then I realized like this is the standard way of logging into Wi-Fi in public places in Istanbul. That being said, once you get into like a Starbucks or an espresso lab and go to a different floor and set up your computer, nobody bothers you. You can probably work the whole day there for 8 hours, with one coffee purchase. Like nobody's checking anyone. That was the case with Starbucks. My main co-working space, you could say, apart from working from home here in Istanbul, was the Starbucks. And I just bought a cheap coffee, went upstairs, and basically worked for a few hours until I needed to, use the bathroom or something. I don't leave my computer sitting around, especially when the bathroom was like 2 floors up. But yeah, that was the main thing I noticed about the internet is phone SMS login, not password. So I obviously preferred the venues where there was a Wi-Fi password. It means that you don't ever have to log in again once you go back to that place. So that's what I liked about that. One thing I will say about the internet is on mobile data, what I did was I was so worried about scams and being scammed at the airport that I made sure to get a SIM as soon as I arrived in Istanbul. And I would just say that the Vodafone store at the airport, I'm pretty sure rip you off, because I paid 960 lira for a phone plan that was supposed to last me 2 months, but the data has already run out. It ran out a few days, like a day or two ago, and because I'm leaving today, I didn't bother to recharge. I've just been using Wi-Fi and stuff. But yeah, keep that in mind. That's like the most expensive SIM I've ever paid for. 960 lira. I'll just look it up for you guys in, US dollars is currently 57 and 52 cents. So yeah, most expensive SIM that I've ever bought, but I'm okay with paying for the convenience, but it's pretty exorbitant. And that wasn't even the most expensive one. There were cheaper options. There were more expensive ones. That was like the mid-range option. So that was the cost of it. But then also the annoying thing one of the most annoying things. And in Turkey, you'll listen in this podcast. There's a lot of weird things about Turkey, but I don't know why, but my mobile data was restricted, right? So one thing I noticed is I could be, if I was in Wi-Fi and I started watching a YouTube video and then left the house, then I go to my watch later list, and then suddenly all these videos are like, this video may be inappropriate, this video may be inappropriate. Even searching this podcast on the YouTube app while I'm on 4G data provided by Vodafone, I'm not able to access the Lisbon episode and the episodes that come before the Thailand episode. It's bizarre because I don't know what their policy on restricted content is, but a lot of it is restricted. So like, I couldn't use my crypto.com app on mobile 4G. I couldn't look at YouTube comments on any video or comment on any video on YouTube. And certain videos were restricted. They just didn't show up. And maybe there's some other restrictions as well, but those are the ones I noticed the most. I actually, since I got YouTube Premium, I'm using the YouTube app on my phone quite a bit. And so that was frustrating. So that's one of the weird quirks about Turkey. I did try and get my friend to call up and get restricted mode removed if that's an option, but so maybe there is an option to remove it, but I don't know. So yeah, that's internet. Another thing that was, I guess, a con of my experience here was gyms. Like, I'm in the Taksim area, which I'll talk more about areas in a later part of this podcast, but gyms were hard to come by. A lot of the reviews I saw on Google Maps were poor for gyms that looked higher quality. I went to a few like spa/gyms that were advertised, or not advertised, but like they had a location on Google Maps. I went there, and I remember one of them, I was like, hey, can I use it? I don't stay at the hotel. She's like, which hotel do you stay at? And I'm like, I'm not staying at any hotel. And she's just like, what? She was so confused because the gym was not open to the public, and she didn't understand what I meant when I said, is it open to the public? So what I ended up doing is I found another gym like that's in the Green Park Hotel, which is some... Hotels can be weird here, you know. It's like a small little boutique hotel that's not very nice. And I paid 100 lira per session to use this gym. And it was a small gym, very dodgy gym. Certain things were broken, didn't work. But it actually did the trick okay for 1 month in Istanbul. I'm kind of in maintenance mode at the moment, so I didn't need anything too crazy. But that is this is a widespread problem in Istanbul. I don't think they have much of a gym fitness culture. It's definitely different to where I'm from in Australia, where there's 24-hour gyms on every corner. That doesn't exist, as far as I know, in Istanbul. If you want to be close to gyms and that's a priority, definitely be careful of what area you stay in. If you stay in the more bougie areas like Nishantashire, then you'll, be able to find like Pilates studios and all that stuff. But around here in Taksim sort of area, basically nothing. So yeah, for all my fitness freaks out there, let's talk about getting around. The roads. So it's funny, when I got here, I was like, okay, like I can just take Uber everywhere. And I thought that would be the best bet. But it's funny, when I started to use Google Maps and look at how long it's going to take me to get from one place to another, I saw that using the metro was just as quick, or if not quicker, due to the crazy traffic that happens at some time of the day, and just the roads being a bit nuts here. And so what I did was, actually go down, try to use the metro. But it's very hard to use the metro if you don't have their metro, their sort of public transport card. It's called the Istanbul cart with a K. Definitely get one of these Istanbul carts. I heard that you can get them at the airport. I didn't think ahead and get one at the airport, so I would definitely pick one up at the airport if you can. But I had to go and find some random stall where it said Istanbul carts sold here, and I bought from there. And then my experience, this was pretty early. This was like the first week, I think, of being here. My experience changed a heap after I got this cart, because public transport is so cheap and you only have to tap on at the start of your trip. So you just like take your cart, Istanbul cart out, tap it, and then you're on the metro, and there's like so many options. Public transport is really good and cheap here. And when I say cheap, I mean like most of the time I think most trips I took like on the metro were like 7.5 lira. So like, what's that in US dollars? That's like 45 US cents, for a one-way trip, So very affordable, and pretty good system too. That was one of the biggest surprises of Istanbul, was the public transport system. And then I don't know if this comes under like transportation, but drivers are crazy in Istanbul. So they seem to like drive super close to pedestrians, but nobody, as far as I know, gets hit. It's just like it's like a rule in Istanbul. You need to know, not just check the road left and right when you cross, but like always be looking out for cars, because it's almost like cars don't give way for pedestrians, pedestrians give way to cars. That's kind of how it works around here. So like you kind of have to go in between cars, dodge traffic, and just be super aware is what I would say, because the drivers are going to drive like they're about to hit you like all the time, which can be a bit confronting for some people. I got used to it, and I've been in places where there's crazy driving as well. But yeah, expect once you get into one of these taxis as well, they're going to and like drive like rally car drivers, and don't expect seat belts. It's a bit nuts here. I'll get into Ubers and a few things to watch out for in a little bit once I get to sort of the scam section. Yeah, taxis are like worldwide, I think, the most common scam in the world. But we'll get to that. I want to talk about my accommodation and the area I chose. Accommodation is a weird one in Istanbul, because when you hear about the rents that people are paying here, it is so much lower than the prices that appear on Airbnb. And I've talked to a few people about this. I've spoken to my local friend here, who grew up in Germany but is Turkish and now lives here. And his theory on it is that, inflation is so rampant here, but if you rent, you kind of get grandfathered into the price. That's his theory. Whereas, Airbnb, they can continue to put up the price every month. It could also just be sort of the margin you pay for tourism, because they know tourists have money. I'm not sure why, but for instance, if you take how much I paid for this Airbnb in the Taksim area, for the month of June, I paid around 28,000 lira, which in lira, it sounds like a lot, because I know I met people that are paying like 4,000 lira a month. Granted, this is not in this location, but I told how much I'm paying to some locals, and their eyes went, wow, So I feel like I overpaid, but at the same time, this is what it looked like. This is like was the best option on Airbnb, right? I get criticized. I have in the past been criticized a lot for quote unquote overpaying, but people have got to take into account that you pay a premium for Airbnb, not only because the landlord has to pay a commission to Airbnb, but also because, you're also paying for convenience. You're paying for the fact that they know you're a tourist with foreign money. You're paying for a lot of different benefits with Airbnb. So the price is going to be more, but I thought it was unusually expensive for a country where you can go down the street and have a coffee for less than $2 and have a meal for less than $5. It was interesting. One of, I won't say who, but one of the friends I made here, she's a foreigner, and she was paying $175 a month for a room in a place sharing with a couple on the Asian side. And when I heard that, I was like, oh wow, like, I think what I paid was more like 10 times that. So, but yeah, I've got my own place here. Like, I don't share with anyone, and I've got this whole sort of place to myself. So it's a bit different, obviously, but the prices on Airbnb are a little bit crazy. But I mean, if you wanted to stay here long term, the prices I think go way down if you start to rent. Because like I said, I met a girl paying $4,000 a month. I paid like $28,000. So I've heard that you can pretty much rent in any area for under $1,000 a month from some of the videos I've watched. So yeah, long term, if you want to stay here for a long time, maybe search on the ground. I'm not sure how you would do that. But yeah, Airbnb, bit weird. Let's talk about, when we're on the topic of accommodation, let's talk about the different areas. I watched the areas section of Riley's video over and over again because I wanted to make sure I chose the right area, and I didn't find a lot of Airbnbs that were like modern. So like this Airbnb is quite modern. I'm not sure how new it is, but everything else I kind of looked at was like, had like yellow rugs and just like weird, like I guess Turkish architecture. So like I could have stayed in somewhere cheaper and in probably a better area, but I went with the one that had looked the most modern and clean and fresh. So I'm in near Taksim Square. So I just say the Taksim area. I'm walking distance from Istiklal Street, which is this massive walking street in Istanbul. You definitely have to visit, even if you don't stay nearby here. Riley likes Nişantaşı. I went to Nişantaşı a few times. I feel like it's a good place to visit, but not necessarily a place to live. I'd say on the European side, my recommendation would probably be Beşiktaş. It's like next to Nişantaşı, and it's like I recommend it because it's like where the young people live, right? On the Euro side. One of my local friends that I made here, it's her favorite area. And lots of bars there. I went drinking with another local friend there. So it's like a good young person area. I don't know what the best area would be for like families or stuff, but I would say that it would probably be on the Asian side, which is something to definitely consider, staying on the Asian side. I noticed in Riley's video there was no mention of the Asian side, and I didn't really hear anyone else talk about the Asian side. But the Asian side is not bad. There's an area on the Asian side called Kadıköy, and for a while there I thought, damn it, I should have booked in Kadıköy because it's young. There's like no tourism over there, which is great. Like it's just there's none of that scammers and tourist traps and all of that, right? It's just people living and like young people living too. So like I was like, I wish I chose Kadıköy for a while. There was a friend that I was catching up with who lived in that area, and it was annoying having to cross the strait every time. But as time went on, I realized like, there is more stuff on this side, on the European side. And if you're here for like less than 2 weeks, you're probably going to want to see all that stuff. So it's better to be on the European side. But I think there's a quote. It's often said in Istanbul that you live on the Asian side and you work and visit the European side. So long term, I think the Asian side is better. But for a short stay, yeah, I don't think it was a mistake. Unfortunately, you can't live everywhere in Istanbul, and it's just a large city. So, yeah, like it's always pros and cons. If you live on the Asian side, you're going to be further away from European side stuff. And if you live on the Europe side, you're going to be further away from Asian side stuff. So, yeah, it is what it is. If you do want to stay on the Asian side, I think Katakoi is the best. I basically didn't go anywhere else on the Asian side though. But Katakoi was pretty cool. And then on European side, Galata area is pretty cool. And Beşiktaş. But because Istanbul is spread out and maybe you want to go to different places, I would recommend staying somewhere close to the metro. I'm like 10 minutes walk from the metro station. So it was pretty good. I only had to use taxis and Ubers very rarely here. And I'll use that as my segue into talking about Ubers and taxis here. Basically, it is a given that the Uber drivers and the taxi drivers will try and scam you. I thought because I use Uber that I couldn't be scammed, right? Because, how Uber works is you put in your start and end and the whole thing goes through Uber. Well, turns out I was wrong. I got a little bit of a story to tell you guys. It's kind of embarrassing, but I was over on the Asian side of Istanbul, and it was 1 a.m. So I couldn't take the usual options to get back to the Europe side, which is the Marmaray line, which goes underground. It's basically a metro that goes underground, or ferries. Both are affordable, both are reliable, but they don't run late into the night. So I was like, okay, I'll get my first Uber. Should be fine. So the Uber arrives. I see a car looking at me, a taxi driver looking at me, and this is the other thing about Uber is when you book an Uber, you're actually booking a taxi, not like a private car. So a taxi shows up, and this guy is yelling out at me, Cristiano! And I'm like, I assume he means me. My name is not Cristiano, but it's Chris, right? So they probably assume that it's short for Cristiano. And then I looked at the license plate. I'm like, this doesn't match the what's on Uber, but this guy seemed to be my driver. And I hopped in, and I started moving. I looked at the app, and he wasn't starting the trip. And I was like, oh, shit. My first Uber, and he's already scamming me. So there was a bit of a language barrier. We went back and forth for a bit. And I just said to him, look, if you're not going to run the trip through Uber, just drop me off, pull over and drop me off. I don't want to do this. But he refused, and basically was saying, oh, no, I can't use Uber because the system's down. And I was just like, oh, that has to be total bullshit. That cannot be true, because I would have experienced some sort of issue when I was booking the Uber. And Uber just doesn't go down. I haven't experienced that anywhere in the world. So I thought it was clearly a scam. And I was like, shit, how can I get out of this? I was like, oh, I don't have any cash. That was the excuse I used. So we'll have to use Uber. And then he said, oh, no, that's fine. We'll stop at an ATM. And I was like, oh, shit. He's got me there. And the problem was we were on these highway roads that were we were going super fast. There wasn't anywhere to pull over. And we went across the bridge, and obviously there's nowhere to pull over there. And as soon as we got over the bridge, we were in the Beşiktaş area, and I said, here, just stop here. And I didn't realize, but the area I told him to stop had ATMs. So he was under the impression that I was getting out to get him cash. And he's like, yeah, you go get cash, huh? You go get cash. And I'm like, yeah. And this is where it gets a bit embarrassing, because I really shouldn't have done this, but I was kind of in panic mode because I felt kind of kidnapped that he didn't let me leave the Uber when I asked to be left alone. So I just ran away. I just ran away from the Uber. And I think in his mind, I was trying to fare evade. But in my mind, I was like, he doesn't want to use Uber to start the trip, and he wouldn't drop me off, so I'm just trying to try and escape. Big mistake, because Uber drivers and drivers in Turkey are crazy. So he started chasing me up and down the road. I did the whole trick of running backwards so that he'd have to reverse to catch up with me. And no joke, this guy reversed just as fast as he accelerated forward. And he's just yelling at me from the car. And I'm running. And he chases me into side streets, yelling at me, just whatever he's saying, like in broken English. And then I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to outrun a taxi. I was like huffing and puffing, running as fast as I could. And then he just yells at me, cash, cash, cash. So I hand him 100 lira, and he's just like yells some verbal abuse at me, and then gets in the car and drives off. And then I was just like, as I was catching my breath, I was just like, damn, like I got in that situation over 100 lira. So in hindsight, I really should have just like gotten out of the taxi, said, hey, look, I don't want to be in this taxi if you're going to not use Uber. So here's 100 lira, leave me alone, or something like that. Or just gone through with the trip and let him charge me in cash if that's really what he wants to do. Even though I like the fact that Uber is secure and through, your credit card. But, that I kind of went through a few stages here in Istanbul. The first stage was like, oh my God, this place is so cool. I'm so inspired. And then after that Uber trip, I kind of went through a week where I was like, oh, like this place, like it's getting to me. But then I got over it and I took an Uber again. The next Uber I took with a local friend. So I was like, if there's any issues, she can just talk to the Uber driver. But then this guy didn't like scare me. He started the trip, but then he ended the trip like 15 minutes walk from where I'm staying. And then I said to the girl I was with, I'm like, can you ask him to drop us off at the actual place? And she's just like, she asked him. He said yes, I guess, because he started driving us there. And then we get to mine and he wants 20 lira extra, which is, small amount of money, but why should you have to pay extra for the driver to drop you off at the place that you asked to be dropped off at? So she got her card and just paid it on card. I didn't realize what she was doing, but she just went and paid the 20 extra. And it's just annoying, like this is, I'm really glad that the metro system is really good in Istanbul, because you have to go into a taxi and an Uber and assume it's not going to be a seamless experience. Assume they're going to ask you for cash. Assume they're going to ask you for something else. Assume the fare is going to be bigger than what it said in the app or what you think it should be. And that's really annoying. Like, that's probably the most annoying thing. I'm going to take a drink of this coffee. That is probably the most annoying thing about Istanbul is the taxi drivers. But, to the defense of the Turkish people, the economic crisis is hard on them. And taxi drivers probably feel it a lot. And when they see a foreigner who they know doesn't have to deal with this hyperinflation, like their money they earn the same and it goes down in value while our money stays the same, and we just keep buying more and more of their lira. They kind of get that, and they want to scam us out of a few extra dollars because we can afford it, essentially. But, I'm happy to pay extra for being a foreigner. I just want to know what I'm up for up front. For instance, I went to a Turkish hammam, like a Turkish traditional bath, and the price was 100 lira more than what it had on the website. But they told me that before I actually took the bath. Like, I got there and I said, and like I checked in and they said, here's the price. It's gone up 100. And so they got me to sign off on that price before I took the bath. So, that I I can be like, okay, I can understand that. Whereas with Uber, you expect a certain experience and you don't get it. Anyway, I'm getting on a bit of a rant here. I would say there are some other scams here on the topic of scams, but taxis and Ubers are the place to watch out, the area to watch out for the most. There's some others like silly ones, like just don't trust random dudes in the street that invite you to hang out with them. I wouldn't really do that anyway, but that's apparently a scam. There's this weird scam where like they drop, like some shoe shiner guy drops his brush on the floor. You see it, you pick it up, you give it to him, and in return he wants to give you a shoe shine, and then at the end he asks for money. That apparently is a scam here, and I was like walking down the street one day and something touched my foot and I was like, what's that? And I saw the brush and I was like, that's that scam. And I didn't even pick it up, but the dude started not yelling at me, but like, hey brother, like, oh, let me give you like, and I was just like, I said to the girl I was with, that's a scam. That's a scam right there. So weird ones like that. I don't know if this is a scam, but I went to like the most touristic area to check out the Blue Mosque and Hagia Sophia, which are two popular tourist sites. And as I'm walking to the mosque, there's a few people that are on the street that just like say, hey, you're going to the Blue Mosque, it's closed. And then I would just say, don't trust those people, because I went straight in. I went up to the security guard and I said, oh, is it open to tourists? And he said, yeah, go straight in. So I'm assuming these people say, oh, it's closed, and then redirect you to something else and then ask for money. So yeah, unfortunately, you do have to keep your wits about you with scams here. But I mean, that's, I guess, the downside of their weakening currency, which can be a plus for us with currencies that aren't weakening as fast or getting stronger. So let me get into some like faster stuff here. So that's kind of like some of the bigger stuff that I wanted to talk about. I just want to say overall, things that surprised me about here, some really quick hits here. Nose jobs and hair transplants everywhere. So I didn't realize this until later, but Istanbul is a popular destination for medical tourism. So a lot of people come here for nose jobs for the ladies and hair transplants for the men. So don't be surprised if you see all these people with bandages over their noses, and for men, bandages on the back of their head. Another thing is Google Maps, don't always trust it. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes places don't exist on Google Maps. Sometimes you'll go to a bar that says it's located in a particular hotel, but it's not. Sometimes it'll say go on. For public transport, it's been really good. Pretty damn reliable for public transport, so that's good. But this is one of the places where Google Maps doesn't work as well as it does most of the time. Another thing that surprised me is lemonade. I didn't realize lemonade was such a thing here, but you can get you can go to restaurants and they make proper lemonade for you here, which is cool. Another thing, gender balance. So what that means is when you go to a nightclub, you could get rejected if you don't bring girls, which is like something that's common in like high class clubs. Like if you go to New York and you don't buy a bottle or bring girls with you, or like West Hollywood in the United States, or some exclusive bars in Miami, I'm assuming. But like I didn't expect that from here. And I went to this nightclub on my first Friday, I think it was. And I was there with two guys and one girl, and I'd bought tickets to an event that was happening there. And they still almost rejected us because of gender balance. But I think it's more than gender balance. I think it's how you look, how much you look like you're going to spend. And I think I made a bigger deal in my head about it after that experience, because I went to see Black Coffee play at Kuchuflik Park, and they didn't there wasn't any gender balance thing there because it's not a nightclub. And then I went back to Klein Phoenix, the club I went to where I almost got rejected, and it was me, 2 guys and a girl again, and we had no issues. But these guys were like better dressed, clearly foreigners, and we paid an entry fee. So maybe they were just like, okay, well, doesn't matter. These guys got money or something. I don't know. So it's weird. It made me a little bit nervous to go to the club alone or whatever, because I like going to nightclubs here alone because of the music. Like, I enjoy techno music, which is great here. But yeah, I was worried sometimes about this gender balance thing. Another thing that surprises me is like a huge variability on prices. Like, I went to a place nearby here, got a Turkish coffee for 8 lira. You know, and coffee in general is cheap. Like, you go to Starbucks and you pay 20 lira a coffee. But then you can go to like a restaurant or a bar and like a drink costs 240 lira, you know? So like prices are just weird here. Like, I went to a palace. I don't know if you guys find this weird, but I went to this palace where the minimum drink you could buy was 240 lira, but you could get your car parked for 2 hours from valet for 70 lira. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe because labor costs are low or something. I don't know. Like, I went to Klein Phoenix as well, and like, I wasn't expecting the alcohol to be more expensive than Australia because we have some pretty high alcohol prices. So I gave the guy, I got a vodka soda. I gave the guy 100 lira, and he was like, "Oh no!" And he tapped at the machine. It was 175 lira for a single vodka soda. Let me look that up for you guys in USD. So the current rate, that's over 10 and a half US dollars. But I think pretty much why that exists at Klein Phoenix is people are there getting high to techno music, and they probably don't buy a lot of drinks. So us people that drink and don't do drugs have to subsidize those people, I guess. A few other things that surprised me. I talked about YouTube acting weird and some of the scams. Another cute little thing is that there's cats everywhere. So if you have a cat allergy, you should be fine because you don't have to touch the cats, but just know that there's cats everywhere in Istanbul. It's really weird. And then I've got a final note here that maybe women won't enjoy it here as much as men because like the whole scammy culture is like I don't know, like I don't know what to say on this, but let me just say this. I'll give you the perspective of a female friend that came here. She said that, oh, Taksim, you don't want to stay there. It's full of creepy men, like Arab men looking at you. I don't want to sound like, that's just what she told me. Like, I'm not being racist or anything. It might be a little bit more uncomfortable as a woman in this region. So that's something I wanted to make note of in here. I'm not sure what's the most politically correct way of saying that, but yeah. As a man, I realize when I travel, I'm a little bit safer because people sometimes take advantage of women more so than men. They see them as the easier target. So yeah, I think it's gonna the experience. I met in our group of digital nomads that I connected with here. It was like half female, half male. So don't be deterred from coming to Istanbul if you're a woman. But yeah, maybe don't stay in this area, the Taksim area, and stay somewhere a bit more liberal, like Beşiktaş, Kadıköy, like I mentioned before. All right, I got some quick pros and cons here for you guys. Pros: coffee is cheap, even at Starbucks. It's weird, like when I went to Thailand, the Starbucks is more expensive than the Starbucks in Australia, which I found weird. I guess because Thai people aren't drinking cappuccinos. But here, coffee is cheap. Like at Starbucks, you pay like 20 lira for a coffee, which is like less than $2, like maybe $1.5 US. Super cheap. Food can be super cheap as well. depends on where you go. Fancy restaurants that are catered at tourists, you'll be looking at around like, expect to pay 200 to 400 lira. Most likely, in the 100 to 200, 300 range. But like sometimes you might pay 400 lira at a place if it's particularly fancy or unique food. Public transport, big surprise, big positive there. And one thing I really love, which is not going to be a pro for a lot of people, but I love how they play techno music everywhere. Like I love melodic techno and house music. My favorite cafe here in Istanbul, Federal Coffee in Galata, they're playing like Afro house every day. I went to a nice bougie bar with like dim lighting and a view of the Istanbul at a hotel, and they were playing Afro house there as well. I saw Black Coffee playing here. Yeah, I won't spend too long talking about that because you might not know what I'm talking about, but that for me was a definite pro. Cons of Istanbul, I would say, Wi-Fi is not the fastest, but I think people who do their research know about this. Like NomadList, it's not rated highly for internet, and I think that's why Istanbul is not higher in the rankings on NomadList. As I mentioned earlier, almost all cafes require phone login. I'm not sure why this is the case, which is annoying. Another thing which I mentioned, there's not a big gym or fitness culture. So if fitness is an important thing for you, do your research ahead of time on that. But don't expect much, I would say. The Airbnb market, I was surprised, is much more expensive than the rental market here. That was another surprise. Being scammed by an Uber, that was a surprise. And a negative surprise there. The other thing is like there's not so much like sport that they're into here. If you're a sports fan, obviously they're like football is ubiquitous in Europe. But for instance, like I couldn't find a bar to go watch UFC at, so I just watched it from home. There's not a lot of like sports bars or anything in my experience. And if you do see sport being played on the screen, it's pretty much 100% of the time football or soccer, as we call it in Australia or the US. Another con I would say is like secondhand smoke. Everyone smokes here. So, you can be at a bar or a restaurant and, you're taking in secondhand smoke. Because it gets so busy around these parts, like Taksim, I got this down as like a busyness and long lines, but that's not, it depends on the area you're in. I think that's just a Taksim issue. So, if you're staying in the Taksim area, note that there's going to be crowds and long lines for some things. And the other thing was I had to change my VPN here because I couldn't gain access to the previous VPN I used. So I took this opportunity to switch to NordVPN. This video is not sponsored, although Nord does sponsor a lot of videos. Not sponsored by Nord. I just looked up what are the best ones. They had a deal going and I got them, and it works fine on Wi-Fi, but it doesn't work on... I couldn't get it to work on Vodafone mobile data. So I think they block VPNs on Vodafone, but on Wi-Fi it works. I'll get into some top tips quickly here before I jump into the Q&A from Instagram. Number one, make sure you get an Istanbul cart. I can't stress this enough. If you're going to be here for a while, look at the airport when you arrive for an Istanbul cart, because apparently you can get it there. And it just makes it so easy. You go to the metro, you tap your card, you walk straight through. If you don't do that, buying a single trip is difficult because they only accept certain notes. Like you can't put in 100 lira and get a single ticket. Like that's too much. Too much. They don't want to give you that much change. So note that. You want to get an Istanbul cart. And it's funnily enough used for more than public transport. Like I used it to use a public bathroom once, which you might be like, you got to pay for toilets, but it was like 1 lira to use the bathrooms. If you've got the Istanbul card, you don't mind paying 1 lira to use the bathroom. It's not a big deal. And then my other top tip would be connect with the community here. So I made a bunch of digital nomad friends here. I met with 2 people via NomadList. I met with somebody who reached out to me on Instagram. I met with actually one of the people I messaged on NomadList who were listed here, and I went to connect with them, told me about this WhatsApp group, and then I joined the WhatsApp group, and then just as I joined, somebody else had joined as well and was like starting to organize things. So I went on a few trips and dinners with people from this community, and it was good. It was really great to connect and have some like-minded people to do activities with and stuff. If you're on NomadList, use it. Excuse me. Yeah, if you're on NomadList, use it. Up to you whether you want to pay the whatever it costs to join it these days. I've been on NomadList for 7 years, so I still use it. Yeah, if you actually want a link to this WhatsApp group, just let me know and I'll send you the link to it. It's just a open invite link. But just I'll ask that don't ask for it until you're in Istanbul, because we don't want the group to hit its limit when with people that aren't even in Istanbul. So if you're in Istanbul and you want to join this WhatsApp group, just let me know. Yeah, but there's other options like, if you've got a good Instagram, you can message other digital nomads or whatever, use NomadList, the WhatsApp chat. Check out Istanbul Digital Nomads on Facebook. It's not very active. And I know some people here have used meetup.com as well. I'm not a big fan of meetup.com. But yeah, you can meet people through that as well. Actually, one of the other ones that somebody mentioned here is Internations. But yeah, that's obviously, there's an existing infrastructure, I'm sure, for meeting traditional expats, which I think Internations falls under. But yeah, I would say definitely NomadList if you want to pay the money or have it already, and then log on to the Facebook group and see what's going on as well. All right, so overall, I initially thought Istanbul was a underrated city, and I think I thought that because nobody I know from Australia comes here. Like I haven't met any Australians that have ever been here. Even my friends in Thailand, I don't think have ever been here. So yeah, I haven't heard much about Istanbul. But what I will say is that Istanbul is a great place as a digital nomad to visit for at least 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, I felt like that was enough to see everything. So if you're just trying to get a lot of destinations in this year, 2 weeks is enough. But it's a good destination, and I've met a few people that wanted to come for like a short amount of time and stayed for a long time. So it's cool. I mean, the country's got some problems at the moment, and that might get worse. Who knows? But the flip side of that is because the currency is not strong, means you can get some really good bargains here. So yeah, Istanbul, I thought it was great. And now let's jump into the Q&A. All right. So I'll take a swig of my coffee here because I've been talking for quite a while. Just having some of this cold brew coffee from Espresso Lab. I've been buying it quite regularly. 1 bottle of this Espresso Lab cold brew is only 34 lira. So some of the cheapest cold brew I've ever had in the world, and it tastes good too. All right. Keva's Journey asks, what kind of apps do you use to meet travelers and nomads? As I mentioned, NomadList. Some destinations have a big Facebook community, some don't. So when I usually go to Facebook first, or go to, if it's like an island and there's like one co-working space that's for digital nomads, I go to that. But for Istanbul, I got kickstarted here based off NomadList, and that led me to the WhatsApp chat. My mate Ryan has a question here, but it's cut off, so I don't know how to read that. Mark asks, best districts to live in. I've already talked about this, so I want to make this really brief. I would recommend Beşiktaş, or anywhere on close to the metro line on the Euro side, and Kadıköy on the Asian side, if you want to do Asian side. Swan Diggity asks, what neighborhood is good for digital nomads? So similar question, just expanding on that last answer. Definitely Asian side for long-term living, 100%. Like if I was going to stay longer, like maybe 6 months plus in Istanbul, I think I would live in Kadıköy, because it's more like long-term livable. For a short stay, look, I was pissed off with Taksim, but it's near, it's on a metro line. So, I can get anywhere I need to in the city through the metro. All right. Again, another question about Euro Asian side. Rexen Doda has asked, can you European side and Asian side of Istanbul in a cultural perspective? I'm assuming, can you explain or something? The funny thing about the Asian side is it's in some ways more European than the European side. So like, there's nothing Asian about the Asian side, just so you guys know. Like you go there and it's not like there's Chinese restaurants or Mongolian restaurants or Indian restaurants everywhere. You know what I mean? Like it's just a name. It's just technically a part of Asia, but it's actually less Middle Eastern on the Asian side, is what I'll say. Taksim is a very like Middle Eastern, like Arab influenced place, and like the whole of the Euro side, many places are kind of more Middle Eastern, more Arab. The Asian side is just more European, which is ironic. Mark has another question. Is the city cooler than Lisbon? I was actually thinking of like doing a follow-up on Lisbon after I recorded the end of that last podcast. I didn't vibe with Lisbon at all. So I definitely rate Istanbul higher than Lisbon. I think it's a cooler city than Lisbon. I understand why people like Lisbon, but Lisbon it's not the vibe for me. I think it's two different vibes. I'd definitely say it's cooler, but it depends on what you're looking for. Maybe you don't want to live in somewhere that's cool and exotic, and maybe Lisbon's for you. My friends that are still there love it, so each to their own. Gunnar asks, how does it feel amongst all the economic troubles in Turkey? Is it unsafe? I would say don't like be political at all in Turkey. Don't protest. Don't speak out against the government or anything, like obviously, and you'll be fine. That's just don't rock the boat in that regard, and you'll be fine. As a tourist, they want tourists, you help bring money to the economy. It's good. The only thing that, as the economic troubles increase, the amount of scams and how desperate people get to scam you is higher. So that would be the only manifestation of the economic troubles is people getting more desperate to scam you. How much does it cost to live in Istanbul as a digital nomad? Good question. I usually do my end of month accounting on the first day of the following month. I can bring up some of my expenses now for you guys. I do track. I've spent, this is all going to be in Australian dollars though, so I'm not sure if it's going to be relevant to you guys on the US dollars. But overall, my day-to-day spending has come out to $2,000. So what's that in US dollars? about $1,400 in my day-to-day spending. And as I mentioned, my accommodation was around $1,700. So yeah, accommodation was pretty big proportion compared to everything else. And then some other expenses, like that doesn't include the backstage ticket I bought to Black Coffee and some other things. But yeah, it's quite, I wouldn't say it's Thailand cheap, but it's affordable. You know, it's definitely affordable for like the biggest city in Europe, with like all the flavor, all the exoticism of it. Like, it's good value for money. Digital nomad expat community, how do you make friends there? I feel like I've already covered that enough. Describe the culture of the local people. What I will say on that is, don't think that Turkey is Arabic or Middle Eastern. Because it's so close to the Middle East and Arabic countries, there is a lot of those people that have migrated over and they bring their culture with them. But the Turkish culture is actually quite unique and separate. The language is nothing like Arabic. The cuisine, I guess, is like a mixture of... I mean, I haven't spent much time in the Middle East, so I can't be an authority on this, but it feels like a cross between like Eastern European food and Middle Eastern food. The cuisine here, and Europe, yeah, Eastern European, Middle Eastern. You know, the main thing they eat is like doner and like mixed grill, like shish kebabs. You know, the culture of the local people. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I like how distinct the Turkish culture is. It's not necessarily normal European, it's not Middle Eastern, it kind of sits somewhere in between, but it's neither one of those. It'd be more European than Middle Eastern, I'd say. But fascinating. I definitely recommend checking it out and getting a sense of the culture yourself. Jeremy wants me to compare it to other digital nomad destinations. I mean, you've got NomadList for that, with like, you know, hundreds of other digital nomad destinations. I would say it doesn't make it into my like top 5 of digital nomad destinations. It's just a cool exotic city. I mean, some of the things that make it not the best digital nomad destination, I guess, is like they don't have like... I realize that the type of digital nomad I am is like, I like to go to co-working spaces with other digital nomads, and I like fast internet and like lots of cafes to work from. Istanbul excels on the cafes to work from front, but the digital nomad scene and culture is, you're gonna have to like look for people on NomadList and Facebook groups, basically. I've just realized like I'm running pretty long. I thought this podcast was going to be short. Let me try and wrap up here. Things that surprised me, I've already talked about. How is the stay in hotels or Airbnb? Not sure what Abhinav means there in terms of whether I recommend Airbnbs or hotels. Definitely recommend Airbnb if you're staying here for a while. That just kind of goes without saying. My friend Philip asks, what's a good amount of time to spend in Istanbul if you've never been there? I'd say minimum 2 weeks. But that's like a lot of places for me. It's like 2 weeks I get a sense of the city. How do you find accommodation is another question. I found it through Airbnb. But I'm not sure about living locally. I think you can maybe find it through Facebook groups. I saw a room advertised on Istanbul Digital Nomads Facebook group. So I'm not an expert on that. I just used Airbnb. And here's a good one to wrap up. Charles Schwab asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your experience in Turkey? I mean, it's hard to, use scales like that, 1 to 10. I've got some good memories here. And I guess the one thing that, was missing from this Turkish experience was I only went to Istanbul. I haven't been to any of the other places. So definitely keen to check out some other places in Turkey, especially Cappadocia. For those of you who don't know, Cappadocia is the it's like the Instagram photo of Turkey. It's like these crazy mountains and then hot air balloons that go up. And if you want the classic Instagram shot there, you might have seen it on before. You like sit on a rooftop and you've just got mountains and like hot air balloons coming up at sunset, and it's just looks incredible. So I want to go there, but it's not the kind of place I want to go alone. So maybe with a future partner or something. I'm not in the rush. I think Turkey's a country that I will come back to. And overall, the experience was really cool. So, as I said, I've gone a long time. I didn't expect to go over an hour. And I think I've almost ran out of recording time on my camera here. But that's my review of Istanbul. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave your comments and questions on the comments section. Thanks for listening. I do this podcast to share my knowledge and experience with you guys, just because why not? I'm in these places already and experiencing them, and you guys have relied on me for information about digital nomad places for a long time, so trying to keep that going and give you guys some more information. I've got a few quick trips coming up, so I don't know if I'll be doing many destination reviews in the next few weeks, but if you guys have a request for a topic on this podcast, or somebody you want me to interview or anything like that, just let me know. I do this podcast for you, and then also, it's fun to express myself as well. So let me know. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.